respected viewers, particularly students of literature and those who are interested in literature, especially English literature. This is a program about one of Shakespeare's most fascinating comedies. Some people call it a farce. One of the most fascinating comedies of Shakespeare, entitled The Taming of the Shrew. This was liked in Shakespeare's day, and it has continued to have its appeal to the readers as well as to those who see it staged. It is as great a success at the stage as a read, a play that gives immense pleasure, peals of laughter, in fact, when you read it as a work of literature. Although unfortunately, the play has not received warm critical attention, to which we will refer a little later. But it's always good to begin with the story, with a word of caution that this is a summary of the play, and a summary can never replace the play. The play is thick, multi-layered, multidimensional. The story or the summary that one gives of a particular play is just a summary. But it's always good to start with a summary, and this is the summary. This is a story which has three strands organically mingled together. There is an induction, call it a frame, Shakespeare begins with. This is the story of a very humorous, comic, ironical story about a very poor tinker, Christopher Sly. He is almost dressed in rags. He has incurred so many debts, and he has always taken recourse to drinking in order to save himself from worries and anxieties. Once upon a time, he has drunk himself into a very sound sleep. And as he is sleeping, a lord is returning from hunting along with his retinue, with his servants who had assisted him in hunting. And it somehow occurs to the mind of the lord that will play a trick upon Christopher Sly, who is fallen asleep after getting himself drunk. He tells his servants, let us suppose that this man is a lord, and as he wakes up, receive him as a lord. And he tells his favorite servant, Bartholomew, that you dress yourself like a woman and address this man as he wakes up. Address him as if he were your husband and you were his lady. And when Christopher Sly wakes up, all of them, all of the servants of the hunting lord, give so much of obsequious, respectful attention towards him. And Bartholomew appears in a woman's dress and addresses him as my lord, my husband, so that he is led to believe that he is actually a lord. And he remarks that I was perhaps dreaming so far, or am dreaming now. But very soon he is disabused of that impression as well. They say, you are not dreaming. You might have been dreaming until now, but this is reality. You are a lord. And then the lord and the huntsman with him tell him that for your pleasure we are presenting a play. And the play proper begins. And the play proper relates to the main plot and the subplot, two plots, the main plot and the subplot. The story concerns Baptista, a very rich aristocratic gentleman who has two daughters, Katharina and Bianca. Katharina is known everywhere as a shrew, as an intolerable, unbearable shrew. She is the elder daughter. The younger daughter is Bianca, who is an embodiment of grace, of good manners, of gentleness, of a very mild, almost timid temperament. Bianca gets so many suitors, but nobody is ready to court Katharina, much less think of marrying her. But Baptista says that until my elder daughter gets married, I cannot think of engaging my younger daughter to anyone. Fortunately, a young man with an adventurous temperament, Petruchio, for the sake of the students, Petruchio can be pronounced both as Petruccio and as Petruchio. In the Italian language, they pronounce it with a hard CH, that's K, Petruchio. But in English, you can pronounce it as you like, Petruccio or Petruchio. Petruchio is a very adventurous young man, and he offers himself willingly to be the husband of Katharina. And this amazes everyone, including Katharina's father. They can't believe that any young man can be as mad as to offer himself at the stake to become Katharina's husband. But Petruchio says that I'll tame her. Well, later on I'll tell you this, what is this taming business. This was very common in the literatures of the East and the West, folklore, folk legend. We'll come to that a little later. So Petruchio says that I will tame her. And the first encounter is very interesting. Before the encounter, Petruchio says, if she starts raving, railing, abusing me, I will say, no nightingale has ever sung so sweetly as you sing. And if she frowns at me, I will say, your face is just like a rose which has been washed by dew. Fresh, beautiful, fascinating. If she keeps absolutely mum, silent, I will start praising her volubility, her eloquence, the way she speaks. So the first encounter is very interesting. Petruchio gets the better. Although she loses her temper, she even throws a stool at the head of her tutor and breaks his head. But nothing can in any way discourage Petruchio from the course that he has decided to adopt, to marry Katharina. Ultimately, the marriage takes place, and then immediately after marriage, Petruchio tells Katharina that they should go to his town immediately. And on the way, and when she reaches her husband's home, she is treated in a very queer manner, very strange manner. The servants come with dishes. Petruchio throws them away, saying, you have not cooked them well for the lady. Is this the way to cook dishes for a bride? So he would throw away everything, so that poor Katharina has to go without food and remain hungry for 2 days. In the evening, when the bed is made up, he throws away the cushions, he throws away the bedding. He says, you have not been able to make a proper bed for your lady. And she has to go without sleep. After 2 days of hunger and sleep, she just craves for a morsel of whatever food, a morsel of food. And then it is given to her. Finally, when Petruchio begins to see that the taming process is taking effect, he suggests to her that we will now go back to your father's house in clothes which are befitting a bride, befitting a bridegroom. But when the tailor and the haberdasher arrives with the caps, the tailor arrives with clothes, again Petruchio throws those clothes away, throws the caps away. Katharina says the caps are very good, they are in fashion. The dresses are well made, they are in accord with the fashion of the day. He says, no, they have not been made well, so he throws them away. This is again another lesson in the taming of the shrew. And when they start on the journey to go to Katharina's father's home, Petruchio says, now we must leave, it is 7 o'clock. Actually, it is 2 p.m. She says it is 2 p.m. He says, no, unless you agree that it is 7 o'clock, I will not leave. So she says, okay, whatever time you say, that is the time. So they leave. On the way, they meet a very old man, very old, decrepit old man, Vincentio. Petruchio says, here is a lovely young lady. Get off your horse and hug him. Embrace this young lady. She, by this time, she says, yes, it is a young lady. I will embrace. But he says, no, it is not a young lady. It is an old man. She says, yes, it is an old man. Then he points towards the sun and says, the moon is shining bright. She says, it is not the moon. It is the sun. He says, no, I say it is the moon. She says, okay, I have forgotten. It is the moon. Then he reverses his statement again and says, no, it is the sun. She says, henceforward, whatever you say, I will agree. You call the sun the moon the sun. You call a man a woman a man. I'll always agree with you. And by the time they reach Katharina's father's home, everything is changed. She has been fully tamed. And when they are sitting in the feast, Bianca has now been married. There is another person who has married a widow. A wager is laid. A wager is proposed. They enter into a bet. Petruchio says that my wife is most obedient and the gentlest of all. Nobody accepts that. And a big amount is proposed as the sum of the wager. And he says, send for your wives. One after the other, the other two send for their wives. They say, we are busy. It's a festive occasion. There is so much to do. We'll come later. But when Petruchio sends for Katharina, Katharina immediately presents herself. And then he tells us that you go back and fetch the other 2 wives also, recently married women. And she goes and brings those 2 women also. And Petruchio wins the wager. This is a summary of the story. Before I look at the story from a critical point of view, let us have a look at the sources. And once again, you will see the miraculous workmanship of Shakespeare. The sources are folk tales, legend, including Arabian Nights, which had been translated into English by then. In folk tales, folklore, legend, including Arabian Nights, you have several stories about how a shrew is to be tamed. The taming of the shrew is one of the main motifs of all folklore, not only Western folklore. Arabian Nights belongs to the East, Eastern folklore. And shrews have always been there, and there have always been attempts to tame them. Then another source of Shakespeare was George Gascoigne. Gascoigne had written a play called Supposes. And that's a very important title. In turn, Gascoigne had borrowed the material for his play from Ariosto's I Suppositi. Both Supposes and I Suppositi turn upon one important thing, that suppose things are not as they seem to be. Suppose a Christopher Sly is a lord. Suppose a woman is a man. Suppose a shrew is not at heart very bad. That is, suppose we begin to live life anew, supposing things different from what they seem to be. What will be the world like? Now, this is an important idea because it points to one of the weightiest themes of all literature, the contrast between appearance and reality. You know, the contrast between appearance and reality is one of the weightiest themes of all literature, particularly fictional literature. And I include in fiction epic, I include in fiction drama, novel, short story, because all irony arises out of the contrast between the appearance and the reality. What appears to be real may not be real. The reality may be different. And great creative writers have access to understanding the implications of this contrast between appearance and reality. This contrast is visible in language, in style, whether you speak, whether you write. This contrast is visible on the whole in human life, because human life always proceeds on two planes. There is an apparent plane. I am speaking now. After half an hour, I may not be alive, but I don't know anything about what is going to happen in 1 minute or 2 minutes and half an hour later. So nobody knows what in reality is happening. We are always engaged with, we are always absorbed by, occupied with the appearance. The great writer tries to probe beneath the appearance and see the reality. And when he has access to the reality and brings it to the forefront, a contrast arrives between appearance and reality, and that gives rise to all kinds of irony, not merely verbal irony. Verbal irony is a poor, weak, feeble thing. The greater irony that exists in great works of literature, Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, for instance, Shakespeare's Macbeth, for instance, Shakespeare's comedies, most of the comedies, for instance, that irony turns on this contrast between the human plane and the divine. Call it, if you are not believers, you can use some other term. But the divine plane is always doing something which may be contrary to what things appear to be. So this appearance and reality theme is a common theme of all great literature. And these two plays, which acted as inspiration, not so much as sources, acted as inspiration on Shakespeare, are both entitled Suppose. Suppose this is true. And if you proceed on, if you build your life on this suppose, then things may be different. Shakespeare has borrowed most of the plot, the two plots relating to Katharina and Bianca. He has borrowed them from the sources, just the bare outline. But he has added this important frame to it. That's very important. He has added to it the very comic, full of comic irony, the story of Christopher Sly, the drunkard, the poor tinker, who is made to believe that he is a lord. And he creates such a frame in which he places the story. And the story becomes much more meaningful, much more multi-layered when it is placed in that frame. And when it's placed in that frame, then we are, as readers or as playgoers, as watchers of the play in the theater, we are, in other words, told, look here, we suppose this is true. This may not be true. This has to be borne in mind because it will help us understand when we approach the play in critical terms. And as I said, in critical terms, the play has suffered neglect, which is very strange. It has been dismissed right from the beginning as a farce. Now let us say it's a farce. What is wrong in a work of art being a farce? A farce is subjected to the terms of art. A farce also assumes the form of genuine, authentic literature, whether it is a play or a poem or whatever. So what's wrong with something if we dub it, or if it really is a farce? But farce can sometimes also take such a form that it becomes a genuine piece of literature. What are the literary dimensions of the play? Why has it suffered from critical neglect? And what is the relevance of the play for the modern reader and for the modern playgoer? We'll look at these aspects of the play in another talk about the play. Until then, goodbye and thank you.